I learned the truth the night my parents stood on a stage and thanked my brother for a success he could not have achieved without me, while I sat in the audience clapping like a stranger who had wandered into the wrong life. The room was full of people who believed a clean story. Hard work, perseverance, family values. My mother's voice shook with pride as she spoke into the microphone, my father's hand heavy on my brother's shoulder as if he were holding something precious and fragile. My brother smiled the way he always did when he was being praised, wide, effortless, practiced, and when the applause swelled, I felt something inside me go very quiet. Not pain. Not anger. Recognition. I knew then that whatever role I had played in getting him there was already erased, and that the erasure had been deliberate. I had always been the background sibling. The one who didn't need much. The one who was independent. My parents said that word like it was proof they'd done something right, like it excused everything else. When my brother struggled in school, they worried. When he failed exams, they hired tutors. When he dropped out of his first program, they framed it as finding himself. When I succeeded quietly, they nodded and moved on. I learned early that praise was scarce, that stability was expected, and that the safest place to exist was just outside the spotlight. It didn't feel like neglect at the time. It felt like maturity. It felt like being trusted. It felt like not being a problem. The money started small, a book here, a course fee there. I had a job early, and I learned how to budget because no one else was going to do it for me. When my brother decided to apply for a competitive program he couldn't afford, my parents asked if I could help just this once. They didn't frame it as pressure. They framed it as opportunity. "You're good with money," my mother said. "And he really needs this." I paid the application fees. When he got in, they cried and hugged him and told him how proud they were. No one mentioned how it had been paid for. That was the pattern. I funded. They celebrated. Over time, my contributions grew. Tuition gaps, equipment, travel, living expenses during internships that didn't pay. Every time, the ask came wrapped in urgency and love, and every time I said yes because saying no felt like condemning him to failure. I told myself it was temporary. That once he was established, things would balance out. That family invested in each other. I didn't keep track because keeping track felt petty, and I didn't want to be petty. I wanted to be good. What I didn't see then was how the narrative was being shaped without me. My parents spoke about my brother's grit, his resilience, the sacrifices they'd made to support him. Sacrifices they hadn't actually made. When relatives asked how he managed, my mother talked about sleepless nights and careful planning. She never mentioned me. When my father joked about tight budgets, he never clarified whose budget had tightened. I sat there listening to a story where my labor had been reassigned to someone else's virtue. At first I thought it was oversight. Then I realized it was design. The darker shift happened when my brother started believing the story himself. He began to talk about his journey like it was a solo climb. When he thanked our parents publicly, he meant it. He truly believed they had carried him. The checks I'd written, the accounts I'd drained, the overtime I'd worked, they dissolved into the background, like scaffolding removed once a building stands. I became invisible to him in the same way I had always been invisible to them, necessary but not worthy of acknowledgement. The resentment didn't arrive loudly. It arrived as exhaustion, as a constant tightness in my chest, as the feeling that my own life was on hold while I financed someone else's. I postponed moving, delayed plans, chose cheaper options. Every time I tried to talk about it, my parents deflected. "Don't make it about money," my mother said. "This is about family." When I asked for recognition, not repayment, my father frowned and said I was keeping score. "That's not who you are," he said, as if my identity was something they owned. The night of the ceremony, the one with the stage and the microphone, and the applause was when the truth crystallized into something unbearable. My brother gave a speech about perseverance. He thanked mentors. He thanked our parents. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I realized that my silence had trained them all. I had taught them that my contribution did not require a name. That my absence from the story was acceptable as long as the ending was impressive. After that night, I stopped paying. Not dramatically. I just didn't transfer the next time they asked. The response was immediate and brutal in its clarity. My parents accused me of jealousy. of bitterness, of trying to sabotage my brother's future. My brother called me ungrateful. Ungrateful. The word landed with a hollow thud, because I finally understood how thoroughly the roles had been reversed. In their eyes, I wasn't the one who had given. I was the one who owed. I owed them compliance. I owed him support. I owed everyone the version of myself who never asked to be seen. The darkest realization came later, alone, when I reviewed years of statements and finally did what I'd been avoiding. I added it up. The number was staggering, life-altering, enough to have changed my own trajectory completely. I sat on the floor with my laptop open and felt something like grief, not just for the money, but for the years I had lived as a ghost in my own family. They had praised my sibling for achievements I paid for, and they had done it so convincingly that even I had started to doubt my role. I confronted them one last time, not to demand repayment, not to beg for gratitude, just to say the truth out loud. My mother cried and said she didn't realize I felt that way. My father said intentions mattered more than details. My brother said he wished I'd spoken up sooner, as if the silence hadn't been enforced by the very system he benefited from. None of them apologized in a way that acknowledged harm. They apologized for my feelings, for the discomfort of the conversation, for the inconvenience of my clarity. I left that night knowing something final had shifted. They would continue telling their version of the story. They would continue praising him. And they would continue seeing me as difficult, distant, changed. What they wouldn't to see, and what I no longer needed them to see, was the truth. That I had built a future for someone else while quietly dismantling my own, and that the darkness wasn't just in what they took from me, but in how easily they learned to forget who paid the price.